Hello Year 7 and welcome to our third video here for measurement. In our last video we talked about area and units of area, right? We talked about square centimetres, square metres, hectares perhaps. Today we want to look at calculating the area of a rectangle. So we're talking about area, we're talking about how much space it occupies, some shape, and I could say that is how many unit squares fit inside. By that I mean a square that is 1 unit on each side. So I have some irregular looking shape here. I've got a shape, and here is representation of 1 square centimetre, right? A unit square, 1 square centimetre. And I want to see how many of those squares fit inside. So I could arrange them like this. Sort of go, well, I reckon I can fit about 14 in. Some of them overhang a little bit, and there's some empty spaces, but all in all, yeah, maybe 14. It's okay. It's okay, right? It is essentially what we mean, though, when I'm finding the area. How many square centimetres, how many of those squares might fit inside the shape? Right. I might be a bit more organised. Now, I say that is approximately 14 square centimetres. And I could put a nice regular grid over the top and look at each one of those squares and say, is more than half or less than half of each square within the shape? And so if I look at something like this square here, it's fairly close, but the inside part looks like it's slightly more than the outside part here, so I counted that as a yes. Whereas maybe something like this square down here, the inside part looks like slightly less than the outside part, so I didn't include that one. So it's a bit hit and miss. Count those up and I get 15 square centimetres this time. So it's only approximate. Some of those areas aren't included properly. Now with irregular curved shapes like that, it's always going to be, an approximation. It won't ever be perfect. If, however, I'm working with rectangles, then I can get something pretty close to a perfectly correct answer. See, here is a rectangle, and if I put the grid over it, right, let's say that's a 1 centimetre grid, then I can count that up and go, I have 10 squares there, 10 unit squares, so the area is 10 square centimetres. 10 square centimetres without any sort of doubts. There's nothing extra hanging over, there's no blank spaces. Right? And we can, of course, count all of the individual squares, but that's fairly time consuming in a lot of cases. Right, what I'm going to do is group them together a little bit, right? Rather than counting them all up, right, what I'm going to do is say I have 5 groups of 2 here, right? 5 groups of 2, and instead of counting those or even adding them together, right, when I have a number of groups the same size, I can multiply. That's our shortcut, right? And it's 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10 square centimetres, right? We could do that way, group them up. I could group them a different way. I could have 2 equal groups of 5 like this, right? And then I would perhaps write an expression that area is 2 times 5. There are 2 lots of 5, which of course is still 10. Whether I do 2 times 5 or 5 times 2 doesn't matter. So what we can do there, rather than counting all the squares, we can use multiplication to speed the process up, as long as I know how many rows and how many columns of squares. So let's look at our rectangle this way, and I'm going to label the dimensions of my rectangle, right? How long it is, right, as L for length, and its breadth, sort of how wide it is, and perhaps we've said wide before, but the convention, at least for now, is B for breadth. So that's that way, the length and the breadth. And the area then is the length times the breadth, the product of the length and the breadth. So this is a really important formula in mathematics. It might not be the hardest to remember. It might not be very complicated, but area equals length times breadth is going to get reused in so many different ways before you finish high school, and even after you finish high school, perhaps if you do some more study in mathematics. It is a really fundamental part of so many branches of mathematics. Right? The area of a rectangle, length times breadth. Anyhow, it seems like a big thing. It's not hard to remember. Length times breadth. And if you swap the order around, it doesn't matter because we know 2 times 3 equals 3 times 2. Okay, that doesn't matter. So let's have a look at an example. This is how I like to set it out. Calculate the area of this rectangle. Wonderful. So we've got our sketch. That's fine. That's often the case when we're given a question, but if we're working from the textbook, we probably need to draw that sketch. Right, draw and label our diagram. Then we're going to write the formula. A equals LB. Area is length times breadth. What I want to do next, and it's something that honestly not many other teachers are going to ask you to do, well, it's not going to take a long time, and I think it is a useful step. I want you to write down what L is and what B is. These are the things we're going to substitute into our formula, and I just want to list them. Okay, L is 7 centimeters, my length, and my breadth is 12 centimeters. If you said the length is 12 and the breadth is 7, it wouldn't make any difference. But I'm just going to write those down. Formula, then my substitutions. Then I'm going to combine those two things together. I'm going to rewrite my formula with the substitutions in there. So A equals 7 times 12. Then my final step is to evaluate that is 84 square centimeters. Don't forget the units. And we don't say centimeters squared, we say square centimeters. If I had a grid over that rectangle, it would take quite a while to count all 84 squares, right? That'd be a pretty tedious process. Using this formula, using multiplication, certainly speeds that up. Rightio. Well, that's the area of a rectangle. Let's just go over these things again. The area of a rectangle is the product of its length and breadth, L and B, for length and breadth. Product meaning multiply together. So A equals LB. We're going to set out our work like this. We're going to draw and label a nice neat sketch. We're going to write the formula. We're going to list the substitutions. We are going to substitute into the formula, right? Combine our substitutions with the formula. Then finally, we are going to evaluate that expression and use the correct units. That's it. That is the area of a rectangle. If you've got any questions, send me a message or ask me in class. I'll see you next time. Okay, thank you.